Personal finance practice problem using Excel. APR simple interest example. Prepare to get financially fit by practicing personal finance. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet and would like to follow along, note that we're down here in the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab in essence being an answer key. We have the information on the left-hand side. Going to populate that into the blue area on the right-hand side, comparing and contrasting interest and APR as we roll in things like fees into the situation to see how the APR can kind of give us a comparison between two different loans that might be structured a bit differently. So we have the first scenario where we're just going to say we have a loan of the $100,000, the interest at the $5,000, interest paid at the end of the loan, and the loan is just for just 1 year. So we're just going to calculate this for 1 year and say what would be just the normal interest calculation if we don't have any fees involved. Then we'll roll into the scenario with the fees. So we're going to say then, all right, that means that we have the interest. Let's assume that we have the interest given to us that we're going to back into the rate, and there's no fees involved. So the interest is going to be the $5,000. The loan is going to be for the $100,000. And if we paid interest for the year of the period of $5,000, the interest for that period will then be the interest, which will be the same. It would be, in essence, the same as the APR because we don't have any fees that we're going to roll in on top of it. Would be the 5,000 divided by the 1,000, making that a percent number group, percentifying it. We're looking 5%. Let's add a couple decimals just for the fun of it. And then next scenario, we have the same thing here, but now we're going to say that there's fees that will be involved. Now, it gets a little bit tricky in terms of, well, when will the fees be involved and so on? How exactly are we going to calculate the fees? We're going to assume they're paid first. Basically, everything's going to be paid basically at the end in our situation here, in our instance first. And then we want to think about, well, how can we come to a rate in essence? The general idea here, if I'm comparing loans where one loan charges interest of the $5,000 or possibly they can give it in a percent form, which we'll talk about later, 5%, and they put on fees. And we might have a situation, again, that we have this separate or different rates, and then we have these fees that are rolled into it. That's one of the things that we want to do with basically our APR calculations. We're trying to figure out ways that we can compare and contrast different financing options where the financier has these different kind of situations they're playing with these different numbers. How can we basically line up these loans and get a side-by-side comparison? So if we do this, we're going to say, obviously, this one's going to be higher no matter what because we have the same situation, but fees involved here that we're going to assume at the end. So if we calculate just the interest, it would be the same calculation. We'd say, all right, well, the interest rate that they might give us would still be the interest is going to be up top. Let's put the interest up top is going to be equal to the 5,000, same calculation up top. And then we'll divide that by the loan, divided by the loan of the 100,000, underlining that font group and underline, and this will just be the interest rate, no longer the APR as well, because we have that difference of the fees. That's going to be the 5,000 divided by the 100,000, or making that a percent number group, percentify 5%, adding a couple decimals just for the fun of it. Let's compare that then to the APR, where we're going to try to roll in the fees. So we're going to say, all right, that means that we have the interest and fees, which we're just going to take on an annual basis here, interest and fees. And we'll pick that up and we're going to say that the interest is going to be then the same 5,000. But then we also have these fees, which are kind of like interest because that's charging us just in a different name. You're just calling it something different, but still you're basically charging us for the financing of the 100,000. So let's underline that font group and underline, and that's going to be the interest and fees. Putting that in the outer column using the trusty SUM equals SUM function. We're going to say the 300 and the 5,000, of course, adds up to 5,300. Comparing that to the loan amount being equal to the 100,000, then we're going to have the APR, we're going to call it, and that's going to be equal to the 5,300 divided by the 100,000. Underline here, font group, underline, adding a percentifying this cell, number group, percentifying it, adding a couple decimals, and of course we have what we would expect if we try to roll these two things in to one number. We've got the higher APR than we had in the first scenario, which would the APR equal the interest rate due to the fact that we're trying to get some number that shows us the cost of that 300 kind of in a comparable format to other loans. Let's do a similar scenario here. And this time we'll basically assume a kind of the way you might see an APR calculated typically in like a mortgage interest type of scenario or something like that, where they're going to say that we'll just tack on that $300 basically to the loan amount, meaning the person that's going to be financing is going to take the $300 and then add it to the loan, and so you're going to be basically paying interest on it as well when you pay it back at the end. So that might look something like this, where we'd say, all right, well, that means that the original loan amount was equal to the $100,000. And then we had fees that we're going to tack on that the mortgage company is going to take, and we're just going to add those fees. I'm just going to pick it up here at the 300, underlining that, font group and underline. That means that the balance that basically we're going to be paying interest on, then we're going to add it to the loan. That means we're paying interest on the sum of those two, the $103,000 now. Now, if we take the rate, which we calculated over here to be 5%, if they give us the 5% interest rate, that's not the APR, that's the rate. We're going to say that's going to be number group Percentify, underline, font group, and underline. That then is going to give us the interest that we would be paying on the amount we needed, the $100,000 and the $300. This would be the 103 times the 5%, 5,015. Now we're going to add to it the fees that we paid, which was the $300, which we now added the interest on it as well. So if we underline that, now we've got our interest and fees. So I'm going to call this interest and fees, which is going to be equal to the SUM equals the sum function. The 5,015 and the 300 gives us the 5,315. And we'll compare that to the loan amount. Comparing that to the loan amount. And we're going to say that we have the APR now, which is going to be equal to the 5,315 divided by the loan. Making that a percent number group, percentifying it, adding a couple decimals. We get something slightly different. 5.315. Let's put an underline here. Now the point is here that again, you're paying interest on it, and as opposed to over here, we kind of said that you're just going to be paying the 300, which we assumed basically at the end of the time period. Here you had to pay interest on the 300 because you taxed it onto the loan. When you do an online calculator, then that's often what they'll kind of do with an online calculator. So if I was to pick up a calculator, I looked up, there's various calculators. You could say 100,000 times the 5%. I'm going to say it's annual. Number of periods, I'm going to say 1. Payment frequency, we're going to say annual here. And then I put the financing fees of the 300 and the financing fees, and you get your APR of the 5.315, which is what we came up to, right? Isn't it? 5.315. And then we've got the total amount, the 5,315, the amount financed, the 100 payments, the total loan was the 103 because we had to add the 300 to it, and then the annual payments, the 105,315, and so on and so on. Okay, so now let's do it one more time. And you can see how these rates, we can kind of compare these different rates, right? So if we did it again, let's just take the 100,000, and this is presented a little bit differently, and we changed the fees a bit. So you might be given, say, a 100,000 loan, and then you're saying, well, the interest is 5%, and now they gave you the percent instead of us figuring out what the percent is. In other words, we don't have the percent at the end and then figured out the 5%. They give us the 5%, but that's not the APR we're assuming here. That's the percent, plus they tacked on the fees now of the 900. And so then we have to think about the interest that will be. Now, obviously, now we can calculate what the interest would be without the fees that would be involved, the actual dollar amount of the interest, which would simply be this time the loan amount. So now we have the loan of the 100,000 and the rate they gave us this time. The rate is going to be the 5% on the rate. Percentify in that cell, number group Percentify, font group underline, and then multiply the equal to the 100,000 times the 5%. We got the 5,000, this being the interest. Then we can take a look at the APR. So the APR we're going to be saying is now going to be the interest and fees that we're going to be picking up. We're going to use the same starting point scenario, thinking that we're going to be paying just the fees of this amount, not increasing the loan balance, not paying, in essence, interest on top of the fees. That's our starting point. So we're going to say the interest that we're going to pay then is going to be equal to that 5,000. We're going to say that the fees are going to be equal to the 900. So we're rolling in the fees so we can get to a percent that includes it, font group and underline. We're going to say this is going to be equal to the interest and fees. And sum that up equals the SUM, summing it up. Not the summit of a mountain, but like the sum it up. And let's go ahead and do some indentation here. We're going to then select these three. We're going to go to the alignment indent. Let's indent this one again, alignment indent. And then we're going to do this one, alignment indent, and this one, alignment indent. Once we sum it up, it feels like we just climbed the summit of a mountain because it's so exhilarating. Any case, that's going to be the total interest and fees, and then we're going to compare that to the loan amount, and that's going to be equal to the 100,000. Underlining that, font group and underline, giving us an APR, which is going to be equal to the interest and fees compared to the 100,000 loan, adding a percent number group, percentifying it, adding a few decimals there. We're at the 5.9 now, which of course, again, you would expect the APR to be greater than the interest rate because we're trying to get a number that includes the fees, and it's greater than the prior APR given the fact that, of course, the fees are larger, allowing us to compare this loan and the one below it, which we could have done either way because the fees are greater and the rate was the same under these two. But again, if they adjust the loan amount and then they have different interest rates, then this hopefully can help us to kind of make an intelligent decision on it. So we're going to say, let's do that same scenario where we're going to pay interest on the 900. So if we add it to the loan, so we're going to say, all right, we start off with a loan of 100,000, and then we say that the fees are going to be equal to 900, but we're going to tack that onto the loan so that the issuer of the loan is going to take the 900 right away, and then we're going to have to pay it back at the end and be paying interest on it. So we're going to take the underline. That's going to give us a balance. I'll call it balance, loan balance, that will have equals the SUM, summing it up, sum it, and that's going to be the 109. And then the rate is going to be equal to the 5% over here, the 5% standard rate. We're going to say number group, percentifying it, font group, underline it. This is going to be equal to the 109 times the 5%. We got the 5045 we're going to be paying. That's going to be the interest we pay. And we're going to add then the fees to it, plus the fees now of the 900. Underlining that, font group, underline, and then we can sum it up. We're going to climb that mountain. 5045 and 900, that gives us the 5,945. We summed it, hit the summit on that one. Okay, interest and fees is going to be that, and then we're going to compare that to the loan, which is going to be equal to the 100,000. Underlining that, font group, underline, and then we're going to say that is going to be our APR under this format, which would be equal to the 5,945 divided by the 100,000, percentifying that cell, home tab, percentify, and then adding decibel. You better recognize the percentify, but I got to percentify. Okay, so now let's go back on and let's put that into here just to change this up. We just changed this one to 900 just for our calculator purposes over here. 100,000, 5%, annual, annual, 900, commercials on the side. We get down to the 5.945, which matches what we have over here. So you can see kind of the idea of the APR as it applies out. No matter how you want to think about it, whether you call it an APR or whatever, if you see a structure of a loan that is one that's not standardized, then we want what we're trying to do is standardize the comparison to what we have the most familiar with and what probably is the most common type of loan, industry standard loan, that we can then compare interest rates to. That's kind of the general idea you want to do, and typically that means that you want to kind of annualize things oftentimes, and then you can want to try to roll in the fees into a rate possibly, so you have something that's comparable on a percentage type basis.